Hey everybody. So I debated about having political stuff on my channel. When I first started thinking about having a channel, one of the things that I did want to comment on was political stuff. But then by the time I finally got everything going, I was kind of politicaled out, if that's what you want to call it. Hi. Are you tired of politics too? So in the end, I don't think I'm going to be able to just not say anything at all about stuff that comes up in the political sphere. So what I thought I would do is use this one as my first one to talk about. Everybody else is commenting. I debated about what I was going to say. I didn't want to appear like I was jumping on the bandwagon. My friends that know me well, and they know exactly how I feel about things. So I'm just going to go ahead and talk about them. And I will probably say the wrong stuff. I always do. I have a cousin that unfriended me on Facebook because she didn't like what I was saying. And I'll get into that. So, with racial injustice, you're going to find racial injustice everywhere in all cultures. And that doesn't mean it's right to do. I have cousins who are black, and I worry about them. And I shouldn't have to. I shouldn't have to worry about their safety because they're black, but I do. I have cousins who are Chinese. I have other cousins who are white. I've always considered myself diverse and respectful. So I will say that. Now, that being said, I haven't always been wise through my years. I've learned and I've grown through the years. So, example, back in the 80s, Pollock jokes were common and everybody liked to do them. And I used to say that I could do them because I was part Polish. I've learned now through the years that Polak is actually a derogatory term. It's a racial slur. And telling Polish jokes is demeaning an entire population. I've never allowed the N-word around me. I don't care who is saying it. I don't even let my black cousins say it around me. It's come to be so negative, even when black Americans are not even just black Americans, people who are black in general who use the word to try to reclaim it. I don't think that works either. And I don't think it works because if you're the only race that can say it to yourselves, that's not really reclaiming the word. You shouldn't use a word that nobody else can use. So if I started using the N-word, I would get blasted for using it. Even if I didn't mean it derogatorily, if I was just talking the slang, I would get in trouble for it. I understand that the word is part of a culture. It's part of many cultures. Some try to use it for positive and some try to use it for negative. I just think we shouldn't use it. We shouldn't use the word Pollock. We shouldn't call other people retarded. I have a cousin who has MR, and anytime somebody uses that term in a derogatory way, it puts down that whole community. So I don't care who you're saying it to. I don't allow that word to be used unless it's being used in the clinical sense. I work in the field, so we deal with mental retardation all the time. But even in the field, it is got such a negative connotation with it, they've now changed the terminology. And sometimes I think it's hard to come up with the right words anyhow, but changing the terminology because something has become so negative is not good either. The swastika used to be a positive symbol in some cultures. And then the Nazis took the symbol and gave this negative connotation to it. They changed the whole meaning of the symbol. And that's sad to know. We have a lot of racial injustice, whether it's the black man who is being racially profiled, who is still treated as if he's a slave, that he's not any better or anything like that. Whether it's someone who's Asian and, for a while, the Asians were looked upon negatively, especially Japanese. George Takei, I'm blanking on his name. George, I think, is his first name. But George Takei is a big advocate about educational awareness about the Japanese encampments and what happened, and that it wasn't that long ago. He was a child in one of the Japanese encampments. I think the most obvious racial injustice that we are seeing is against a person of color. And I'll say person of color because the person may be assumed to be black and they're not. Who is pure anymore, There is a lot of mixture in our DNA and where we come from. And so to assume that anybody is pure this or pure that is just not conceivable. I do know that there are folks out there who are not 100%, but very, very high percentage, like 97, 98, 99% this race. One example is, and I can't say her name without looking at it, Lupita. Is that her first name? Let me look it up real quick. Whoops. Sorry, I have my laptop pulled close. Whoops. Where's my L? Lupita. Yeah. Lupita Nyong'o. and I'm probably adding too much at the beginning of her last name. Lupita Nyong'o, I think is how you pronounce it. I watched one of the DNA ancestry. I think it was on. I can't remember his name. Who Do You Think You Are? Is that the name of the show, or is it the other one? It's one of the ancestry shows on PBS. She was on it, and they did her DNA, and she was like 97, 98, 99% of this particular African tribe, whatever it was, which they commented about how unusual that was. Another person who is way up there is, hold on, I have to think about how to say her name without looking at it. Mayim Bialik, Blossom, for those who know Blossom. She also did her DNA. She did it on her YouTube channel. And her comment when she looked at the results was she was the Jewiest Jew she knew. She was also up there in the high 90s with her percentage with Ashkenazi. The Jews aren't thought of as a race, but the Ashkenazi Jew are a DNA ethnic population. There's also the Mizrahi Jews are an ethnic population, and Jews were treated horribly. Human beings are just terrible to other human beings, unfortunately. Black Lives Matter. They do. Black lives do matter. And people get upset that other these groups are saying this. But right now, in the USA, the way we treat our Black brothers and sisters is horrible. And it's the most blatant character flaw of the US. And we need to start somewhere with fixing our attitudes and our beliefs and educate ourselves. About what our ancestors have done and what are we going to do about it. I don't know if you guys remember when everybody was reacting to the video, This Is America. And there was all this great discussion about the video and everybody's adamant interpretation. And I put it that way because Donald Glover has specifically said he is not going to say what interpretation is right and what interpretation is wrong. He wants everybody to interpret for themselves. There are some very obvious symbolisms in the video, but then there's some others that are not as obvious. And there's also a bunch of double and triple and quadruple entendres in the video as far as symbolism. But everybody was talking about it. Everybody was upset about the truth. And it's not upset in that they were mad about what Donald Glover was saying, but they were mad about because it was the truth. But no changes were made. What did anybody do? And that was going to be, when I thought about doing reactions, that was one of the things that I was going to talk about. I was going to do a deep dive into the video and talk about it, and challenge. What are you going to do to make the world better? What are you going to do to change things? And so far, there hasn't been change. Every once in a while, people are outraged by a viral video they see. They rage about it for a few weeks, and then it goes away, and everybody forgets about it. No changes are made. So what are the changes that are going to be made? And honestly, for me, I'm not sure if I can do anything different than what I've already been doing. I don't know if I can add anything to what I'm doing. Can I say anything more? Can I do anything more? I don't know. I already correct people to their face when they say inappropriate things. I try to treat everybody with respect. You know, just because you respect somebody doesn't mean you agree with them. Respect is treating them like a human being. I don't agree with my former coworkers on everything. My former coworker, she's very conservative in her politics, and we'd have great discussions. Didn't always see eye to eye, but I had respect for her. Just because I respected her did not mean I agreed with what she was saying. So we have to learn to respect each other. We have to learn to treat each other like human beings. When I worked at the prison, that was other than my job at the prison, my main goal was to treat everybody like a human being. They've already been tried. They're already doing their punishment. So I need to do my job. I was doing a group, and probably had, I'm trying to think of how many I had in the group. I think there maybe 15 to 20 prisoners in the group. I went in, I had my papers, I had my pen, I had some markers for the erase board, and I put them down on my table, and then I had to prep the room. So I had to put the divider up because it was a big room that you could put a dividing wall up. So I had to put the wall up and then get the chairs in place and everything. And while I was doing that, somebody took my pen. I had 2 pens, and they took one of the pens. So I confronted the group. Right off the bat, start of group. It wasn't the first time we'd met, but it was at the very start of that group. And I said, "Who took my pen? Give me my pen back. I won't do anything if you give me my pen back." You know, giving them ample opportunity. And their reaction, valid reaction, where they were mad at me because they thought I was accusing them of something that they didn't do. And they thought I was accusing them because they were criminals. Very valid reaction on their end, because everywhere they turn, they're treated like criminals rather than treated like human beings. So we went ahead with group. We finished. I went to one of the officers. I think he was, I can't remember the ranks. I can't remember if he was a sergeant or a lieutenant. But I went to him and I said, can you pull up the video footage of this classroom? One of them took my pen. I don't know which one it was. I gave them an opportunity to return it. They didn't. And I told them if they didn't return it, if I found out who it was, I was giving them a charge. I gave them plenty of warning. So we pulled up the footage, figured out who it was. And it was one of the ones I had to deal with a lot on crisis. And when he had another group right after mine. So he was in my colleagues group. So knocked on the window, motioned him over. He knew exactly what I was motioning him over for. He handed my pen back, went and sat back down. And I was like, okay. So I wrote up the charge. So the next group, we talked about that. I talked about the fact, well, they knew I'd given him the charge before we had the group. So they were upset with me for charging him. And I said, listen, I gave him plenty of opportunity to come forward without any punishment. And he, to be fair to you all, he might not have thought that I would give him the break. He might have thought I was going to charge him no matter what. So he would just drag it out because of the way he was treated in the past. I don't know. I don't know what was going through his head. But we talked about it, and they were upset with me for charging him. But we talked about the fact that I talked to the group as a whole and said who took my pen. And I told them that I was sorry to make it sound like I was accusing all of them. And they apologized for taking offense about me accusing them because they thought I was lying. They didn't think a pen had been taken. And it's not that they were covering up for him or anything. They thought, because I had two pens, so I had one left, they thought I was just losing my mind and accusing somebody for no reason. So they apologized for taking offense so quickly. I apologized to them for making it seem like I was accusing all of them. They were upset that I charged him, but as we talked about it, they understood why I went ahead and went through with what I had threatened. And part of it was, if I don't follow through with what I'm going to threaten, then how reliable am I going to be for when I am trying to work with somebody? Now that can be used against me, that could be used against other people, but we had a good discussion about the whole thing. I had a different group where we were talking about our actions, our beliefs, and our consequences. It's cognitive behavioral therapy. And we were talking about different actions and this kind of thing. And so everybody in the group was in the group because they had gotten in trouble at the prison. They had had a charge of some sort. And this was to try to keep them from getting more charges. And so one of the guys in the group was just this bad guy persona, for lack of a better way of putting it. He started challenging me on a scenario, and he said, what if, because we talked about choices, we all have choices. Some are good choices, some are bad choices. Some are not so good either way, but, the lesser of the evils and all this kind of stuff. So we're talking about all these different kinds of choices. And he said to me, what if you and your boyfriend, because I had an engagement ring on, what if you and your boyfriend were out and he was drinking and he ended up driving up on a sidewalk and hit somebody. I don't think he said killed somebody. I think he just said hit somebody. He said, would you turn him in? And I said, yes, in a heartbeat. I would turn him in. And I got known as a cold-hearted bitch. But that was at the end of that group. So the next group we talked about, I said, listen, you posed the scenario to me. You didn't give me many options, either turn them in or not turn them in. But there were other options. Other options were I could have driven if I had not been drinking. We could have gotten an Uber, Lyft, cab, whatever might have been in the area. Not all areas have those as an option. I could have walked instead. We could have stayed the night wherever we were. A lot of times bars will call a cab or Lyft or something like that. So, there were a bunch of options that they didn't give me as a choice. And so we talked about that as well. And what was interesting in that group was that the other guys, we were talking about relationships. This was off of what I just talked about. This is a different thing. We were talking about relationships. And the other guys started to get onto this one guy about how disrespectful he was being to his partner and holding him accountable and that sort of thing. And that's really where we need to get as a society, is holding each other accountable. Cops. There are good cops. There are bad cops. There are, luckily, a lot more good cops than bad cops. But even if the other officers don't like what the bad cop did, the system itself doesn't hold them accountable. And I want to be careful with this as well, because I work with cops all the time. I've seen good ones out there. I've seen ones that are great to work with, mental health patients, and have that calm demeanor and let's talk it out kind of approach. And I've seen the ones that should not be dealing with mental health patients at all. The very short-tempered, they don't understand why they're acting crazy. And, all this kind of stuff. And those cops made it harder for me in my job when I was working in the emergency departments. There were counselors that should not be working crisis. They just did not know how to deal with somebody who's escalating. And when you're working in an ED, you've got people who are escalating all the time. And so our system needs to hold people accountable. Our supervisors need to say, this person is not ready to be a counselor, or this officer should not be working with this population. Is it possible they could work in a different area of law enforcement and it work well because they're not having to interact with this population at all? I don't know if that's possible. Detectives have to deal with everybody. Officers have to work with everybody. So I don't know. Maybe they need to think about a different career. And I was on the Discord server for Mike the Cop, who's another YouTuber. I was on his Discord server for a while. And I was on there because I wanted to hear different perspectives and that sort of thing. Now, that being said, there's kind of only one perspective. But there was also a lot of good talk, good communication. And part of that was, guys would come in and say, I want to be an officer. I'm in college right now. I want to study this, this, and this. And the best advice that the veteran officers would tell them is, study something else. You need to have a backup plan. In the backup plan wasn't so much as law enforcement's not going to work out for you because you don't do it well type of thing. It was more as if you get hurt, you need to have a backup plan. Or if it turns out to be something you don't like in the end, because you have to deal with this or deal with that or, whatever, you need to have a backup plan. So if you're going to college, study something else so that you have that backup plan. And I thought that was great advice. One of the things, the hotline I used to work at, we used to promote it by those in the counseling field, or studying counseling in school, would say, listen, give us a try, see if counseling is something you want to do. This is a good way to find out. They only had to commit to 1 year. And that commitment was if they wanted recommendations afterwards. They could quit before then. They just wouldn't get a recommendation. But they got a good flavor of if mental health and substance use and all that was something that they wanted to deal with. So I'm going off on tangents. I apologize. So holding each other accountable. Those of us that are supervisors, and saying whether we think somebody should be licensed for this or for that, or we're training somebody and before they finish training, should they be recommended for this or that? Officers go through BLEAT, basic law enforcement training, and then they go on to, they go on to further training programs, depending on what it is they want to do and what the state and the county criteria are. Sorry, I'm sweating like crazy. You can see it too. Sorry. I don't have air conditioning. As everybody goes through different levels of the training of their programs, the supervisors need to be adult enough to hold them accountable and say, this has been an issue, and I wonder if maybe you shouldn't think about doing such and such instead, or not doing this, or, that kind of stuff. Having a real heart-to-heart and not passing somebody just because, they went through the steps, they did the program. Just because they complete everything doesn't mean that they should pass. And we, as adults, need to be able to draw that line. We need to be able to have the courage to say no. We need to have the courage to be blunt with the person. Now, part of my problem is I'm too blunt. I don't hide anything. And that's probably why it takes so long for me to find jobs, is because I'm very blunt in my interviews. I don't hold anything back, and I think it's only fair. That helps them know exactly what they're getting into. We need to hold each other accountable, bottom line. If we see something wrong, we need to speak up. Do I always speak up? Probably not. I'm trying to think of an example where I haven't. Situation and context, of course, always applies. But if you see somebody being taken advantage of, or being abused, or being inappropriate, need to speak up. And one of the ways that people are holding folks accountable is by recording them. And if you are in public, they can record you. If you don't want to be recorded, don't be doing whatever it is you're doing. Bottom line. So that's one way we're holding people accountable. Now, the flip side of that, we automatically become the judge, jury, and executioner. We are so quick to want to cancel somebody or fire them or take this away from them or that away from them. And I don't believe in that either. We need to be held accountable, and we need to go through a fair process. We have to trust the process to be fair, though. I admit it's not always fair. And that's what we're doing now with these marches and protests is we're holding our politicians accountable. We're holding our police accountable. You can see in the media the different ways that police forces are reacting. Some of them are jumping right in with the protesters and saying, we're with you, and kneeling with them. And then there's those that come at it from the perspective of violence, which doesn't solve anything. It only makes matters worse. Violence doesn't solve violence. Cats are wrestling. So right now, the American people are holding our government accountable for things. And they're saying, are you going to make changes? And some of the government is saying yes, and some of the government is saying no. And we need to talk to our government about what changes need to happen. What is fair? Sorry. Itch. Is it fair to completely defund our police departments? Well, I think that is a department by department case. Like I said, there's some great police departments, and there's some police departments that are just horrible. I watched Just Mercy recently, and for some reason I had it in my head that it was the 70s. But no, the guy was convicted in 87. I was almost out of high school by then. I have no idea what they're doing. I was almost out of high school. Late 87, the trials and everything went into the 90s. That was not that long ago. And this was happening in Alabama. People are being thrown into jail. Black men and Hispanic men are being thrown into jails for no reason. No evidence. They're not doing great police work. And that's a terrible thing. How would you feel for being thrown into jail or prison for something you haven't done? How do you react when your friends or your family accuse you of something that you haven't done? Even if it's something minor, I go off. I let them know what I think. My mom, to this day, thinks that I called my stepfather a pedophile because my sister told her that I said that. Never said that. My sister was drunk and mad at me because I was trying to hold her accountable for something. So she told my mom that I said that. And to this day, my mom believes it, even though I've let them know what the truth is. And my sister's never corrected it. That's not a big deal when you think about how someone is being put in jail for murder they didn't do. There were eyewitnesses that corroborated his story, and they still put him in jail and convicted him of murder. It is a shoddy system, and a terrible system. And it's slowly changing, but it needs to change faster. And everybody needs to get on board. Or make themselves known so that we know who to stay away from. The Confederate flag. I talked to my friend about the Confederate flag, the former coworker I was telling you about. She has a Confederate flag. She has it in her home. She's very proud of it. Her family were Confederates. And we talked about, there's family pride, but there's also the symbolism of what the Confederate flag stands for. And she didn't argue about what it stood for. She knew what it stood for. It was more of her heritage that she was holding on to. And people get upset about the Confederate flag being out here and there and everywhere. My only beef is it shouldn't be on anything government. Nothing government. You are part of the United States. The Confederate flag represented the people who wanted to leave the United States. So government buildings should not display it. If private individuals want to display it, that's fine. It irritates me, but it also lets me know who is who. So if they want to fly their flag on their private property, let them. It just gives me a better idea about that person. Does that mean I should hate them? No. But it lets me know something about them. I went off on another tangent. I can't remember where I was going. We have a long ways to go to become just and equal and to treat human beings like human beings. I try to be a part of the solution. I don't know if what I'm doing is enough. Like I said, I've pissed off family members because we were talking about Black Lives Matter, and I talked about how, yes, they matter, but I wasn't defending the All Lives Matter motto because I know that it was born out of demonizing the Black Lives Matter. I don't think that's a word, but you guys know it, belittling the Black Lives Matter motto. But I do believe that we need to treat everybody like human beings. We need to treat Black Americans, or even if they're not Black Americans, if they're visiting the U.S. or have a work visa or, whatever it might be. We need to treat any person of color as a human being. We need to treat anybody in addictions like a human being. We need to treat anybody with a psychotic disorder as a human being. We need to treat any religion as a human being. We haven't even started talking about religion on here. That's a big beef with me too. We need to hold each other accountable. We need to try to correct situations as much as we can and say, this is inappropriate, this is wrong. I've had one of my gay friends correct me on something that I did. I didn't get upset that he corrected me. I said, "Oh, thanks for letting me know." And I corrected what I did. The gay community has a lot of injustice amongst them. We need to treat, it's not just the gay community, LGBTQ community. We need to treat each other like human beings because that's what we are. We're human beings. We need to talk, learn, and educate. You don't have to love one another. Be great. But you don't have to love one another. You just need to respect each other. If we all believed the same thing, it would be an awfully boring world. But we can't have difference of opinion and fighting because of that difference of opinion. The fighting needs to be about the actions we take. What are they specifically doing? Are they infringing on another person's rights? Not another person's beliefs, another person's rights. Just because you believe something doesn't mean I have to live the way you believe. But I do have to live by societal norms, which is not hurting animals, not hurting people, not taking advantage of people, not destroying other people's property. I need to have reasons for any of my accusations. I need to be able to back it up. I can't just accuse somebody of something just because I believe it. Now, that being said, I have said, well, I think this, but I don't have any proof. I have said that. I try to be very careful about stories that come out because I know that there's always two sides. But sometimes there's just blatant wrong, like the Ahmaud Arbery case. There's two sides, but the one side is clearly wrong in what they did. I have not watched the whole footage of George Floyd. I've seen enough, though. Clearly wrong, and the police department needs to be held accountable. And from what I've watched and learned from different professionals that have been speaking, it's going to be tough because of current laws. The laws need to change. We need to be able to hold our police accountable. We need to be able to hold our president accountable. The fact that he has done so many wrong things and doesn't have to be charged with it, it's just appalling. And I understand why they have the law that they have, but it also gives permission for assholes like him to do wrong things. And that needs to change. No president should be able to do the stuff that he has done. Even past Republican presidents, Republican staff, administration, even they look at it and say, this is wrong. This that he's doing is wrong. This that he's doing is wrong. And our Congress won't hold him responsible. Should they have held Clinton accountable? Yes. Same thing happened, though. The one branch held him accountable, the other branch refused to. So Clinton was impeached, but didn't have to leave office. Trump was impeached, but didn't have to leave office. And now he thinks he can do anything he wants. It's hot. I'm tired. I've got to get to work soon. So bottom line is, what can we do to make a change for the better, to treat everybody as human beings, start respecting each other, to start standing up for folks when we see something wrong happening, holding each other accountable. And is that going to be enough? We need to hold our government accountable and our communities accountable. And the question is, will that be enough? Thanks for listening to me ramble. I don't know how helpful it was. Those are my thoughts, my perspective, my challenge.